Hey guys, how's it going? I'm the Duke of Italy, favorite lo-fi music YouTuber. Welcome back to another video, and today, something a little different. I'll admit, I did not plan for this to come out today. I planned for it to come out a bit earlier, but this was probably the biggest undertaking I've had to take for a video, and honestly, not entirely worth output. I think my perspective is still a little limited. Honestly, it's given me kind of tunnel vision for 2020. Not that 2020 wasn't rough for people, but musically, it's a bit disappointing as well. Of course, there are things out there that people love. I know Wyatt X Him, Xander G. Cliff, and plenty of other critics have all different picks in their top 5s, 10s, whatever, and even their number 1s, which actually missed both of their number 1 picks, so I'm sorry, guys. I think I got a good enough grasp on the year to make a feasible top 10, because I plugged a lot of these. So pretty much starting in October, after the black metal chart was done, I just started listening to these 2020 listens, just cranking them out until we're finally here. So overall, the year was a bit disappointing. Of course, I actually really got into a lot of music in 2019, and 2019 was a stacked year in terms of things that I still love. Caligula, 1000 Gex, just to name a couple. But this year just seems to be lacking in a lot of things that really grip me. Even some things that were continuations of last year that I didn't like as much, and I'll definitely mention that later. On the bright side, this year gave me a chance to get into a lot of things that I would not have listened to before. For example, Phoebe Bridgers' Punisher. I didn't know anything about Phoebe Bridgers before this year, and then I listened to Punisher, and I'll admit I liked it. It's not on this list, but I liked it. I actually just saw articles and all these different things mentioning these albums, and these influences came from a whole bunch of different places. But I know the number 1 is gonna probably shock you guys, and a lot of these picks maybe you guys didn't see coming, a few you probably did. So I just want to say as a forward that I do not have the ultimate perspective on this year. Just an example of an album that I didn't get to is the new Fleet Foxes album. A lot of people love that album. So let's quit this talk of just whatever. Let's get into the actual music here. First thing, I got some honorable mentions, some dishonorable mentions, and one just sort of mention. I'll mention this first sort of mention as something sort of monumental in 2020. The final Burzum album was released, kind of a compilation, but I reviewed it, Thulean Mysteries. This thing was a massive ambient album. I'll admit, not entirely satisfactory, but I did appreciate a bunch of that album, so I basically just condensed it into a version that I thought was a lot more feasible. And with that version, it's a really solid product, so I'm just giving that a little mention. For dishonorable mentions, I have 3. Firstly, Translation by Black Eyed Peas. Black Eyed Peas are not good. My first music review was the Black Eyed Peas with Fergie discog review, and I despise all of those albums, or I at least very much dislike them. This album's not that much different. Weak hooks, just the worst lyrics. The beats are pretty uninspired, and it's seriously riding the sort of reggaeton rap wave we got going on right now, especially with artists like Bad Bunny, but it flops in every single respect. Another dishonorable mention, not even for the musical quality, because I think there's a track or two off this album that I dig a lot. Whole Lot of Red, Playboy Cardi. And I know it's a meme on this channel to love Dialect, and Dialect's got some amazing beats. And I think there's some decent beats on this album as well. But honestly, Cardi's sort of voice is so much worse than it normally is. Just a lot of his hooks are so much weaker. His lyrics are already not strong. They're even worse here. Also, I wanted to mention it because Cardi, go see your kid. Final little dishonorable mention thing here. Xander G. Cliff love this album, but Smashing Pumpkins' new album, Sear. Okay, yeah, it's synth pop for the most part, but like this thing is like it's not good. It sounds okay, but a lot of the guitar work when it shows up suddenly, it's just like, hey, remember Smashing Pumpkins use guitar? And then he's like, watch me play it terribly. Gosh, I can barely hear like normal drums on this whole thing. Why even have Jimmy Chamberlain here? Billy Corgan's like, hey, you thought my voice was bad before? What if it was so much worse? And then he's like, what if I had these really cheesy, like female-led backup vocals to remind you that I'm not a good singer? Yeah, I was gonna review this album, give it a full thing, but I couldn't bring myself to care. At least with Translation, I was like, wow, that's really bad. This album, I'm just like, just who cares? Xander made the point that it like sounds good. I mean, like, I guess like it sounds okay. underwhelming. And my final dishonorable mention, it's not even worth giving a dishonorable mention because it's not that bad. But just for any of you out there who had any doubt, see if I like change my mind. Future nostalgia, Dua Lipa. I don't like it. Xander J. Cliff put it in like his top like 20 or something like that. Absolutely not. That album was kind of uninspired, kind of boring, pretty bland too. Now onto something we can enjoy, the honorable mentions. First thing, a couple albums that I wasn't sure about getting into as much. I want to mention No by Boris. Boris is a highly acclaimed metal band from Japan, and they're kind of post-metal, kind of avant-garde metal, a whole lot of doom, a whole lot of thrash, noise in some elements, noise rock in some elements. They do a lot of stuff. They even have some ambient material, and I promise you guys I will get into Boris a whole lot more. But this was sort of my first actual introduction to Boris. I really dig this album first time I listened to it, but for the next couple listens, because I couldn't just buy it from Bandcamp if I wasn't sure if I loved it, I just didn't like it as much, honestly. I couldn't even tell you guys why. Maybe it seemed like a mixing issue or something, but it just didn't resonate with me. Now, an album that kind of resonated with me sometimes, I want to mention 333 by the man, the myth, the legend, Blade. Now, obviously, Blade is the greatest artist of all time. Zero Fault. White Armor is unironically a sick producer. I love his material with Blade. But this album for me was very, very interesting. And a lot of times when I re-listen to albums, I'll change perspective on a lot of the tracks. But that has not been more true on this one. My first listen, I really digged almost the whole album except the second track. On my second listen, I loved the second track, but I hated most of the album except the final leg. And then later I was like, man, I really want to listen to that first track again. And then I loved it. Very weird how this album affects you. It's a very weird album, very unconventional for most hip hop. But if you're feeling like you want, I hate this, but a chill vibe, this album's kind of got you. One album I want to mention that I felt like had a whole lot going for it, but it really just missed the mark at a couple places. Modus Vivendi by 070 Shake. 070 Shake was featured on Ghost Town by Kanye West, my personal favorite track of the 2010s. I mentioned that before, and I'll mention it again, and I will never let you guys forget it. I love that track to death. This album, sonically, total trip. This thing is huge. It's spacious. Nice textures going for it. Really excellently produced. Some of the lyrics on a few of the tracks are beyond weak. Like She's On Me Like White on Rice. Very, very clever. But there's only one song in here that I actually disliked, and it was Microdosing. The rest of it, I actually digged a whole lot, bar like a couple bars here and there. So if you want to get into that album, I really, and I mean really, recommend checking out those first two tracks. They're just little snippet tracks, but they're really awesome. So I hope you guys check that out. Final honorable mention, I want to mention Ho, Why Is You Here by Flo Milli. So Flo Milli's really fun. In terms of actual quality, it's missing just a little bit. It's pretty repetitive music. It's not a whole lot going for it in substance, but Flo Milli's voice is highly infectious. These hooks are ridiculously good. Just a really fun album. If it's really made for playing in a car with your friends with the bass cranked to a ridiculous portion. But some of the bars are cool. I just think in terms of quality, it's missing a little bit. But I actually really recommend you guys checking this out. It's like an ironic 10 out of 10, but in reality, probably more like a 6 or a 7. Okay, finally, now for a little bit more quality products, things that just missed the mark for me. First thing I want to mention, Under Acid Hoof by Acid Mammoth. This is a Greek doom metal band. This is Sabbath worshipping doom. It sounds a whole lot like Black Sabbath. In my opinion, a little less creative riffing and a little more monstrous tone, a little more really big tone. If you like bands like Sleep, you're gonna dig this album. I love this album. I think the voice behind it is awesome. It's a lot more of a conventional singing voice, so if you want to get into stoner doom metal, this is a perfectly fine entry point. It might not be the most quality product out there, but I actually digged it a whole lot. Probably only like a less than a minute of the whole album that I didn't enjoy that much. Next time I'll mention Sawayama by Rina Sawayama. I reviewed this. I gave it an 8. Go watch my video. I'll probably link it in the description here. But this album was awesome. I won't spend too much time on it, but totally check it out, guys. Like this album got totally snubbed on everyone's list. It Sabrina deserves more than that. You guys gotta check it out. Next is the Lord Almighty album, Wither. Lord Almighty is a black and roll band, and that sounds ridiculous, but if black metal gets a little too tedious for you, and you don't want anything as complex as maybe like prog or like progressive black metal like the Enslaved does, this album is for you because it's a little off the beaten path. It's not quite black and death metal like technicality, but it's just an incredibly infectious black metal album. You'll get your 3-minute, 4-minute cuts here, sometimes a couple 6 minutes, and a couple little intermission tracks here. This thing is really tight album. The riffs are awesome. Really nice vocals. Overall, pretty awesome album. Only really flaw here for me was I found the intermission track kind of pointless. They weren't bad by any means, but they just didn't hit me like they could have. Next, I want to mention Clipping's new album, Visions of Bodies Being Burned. I liked it a whole lot, but I personally thought that the hooks were not as good as the previous year's effort. There existed an Addiction to Blood. That's my personal higher pick of the two albums, but don't scoff away at this one. I just think, and this is maybe as contrarian, patrician as possible, a little too poppy. Actually, there are a couple tracks here that the hooks are like, well, that's just like it's a hooky rap track, and in terms of a Clipping album, it's just not what I want. I mean, it works in a sense, but it just kind of breaks up the pacing. But of course, you got tracks like that opening that are just awesome. That ending track is really cool. The cover of that avant-garde classical Yoko Ono piece with like hip hop and like industrial and like horrorcore elements, super cool. And finally, the last honorable mention before we get to the actual top 10, I'm going to mention Poppy's album. This one barely missed the cut for the top 10. This album is I Disagree. This thing was Poppy's sort of blend of pop and metalcore for the most of it. Maybe a little bit of deathcore, death metal here and there. But I don't know why this album got snubbed from a bunch of people's lists. Is it a bulletproof song listing here? I'd say no. There are a couple flaws here and there. Maybe the hooks just are a little whiny sounding on like 2 songs, but honestly, I can get rid of it. Every single song here sounds fresh, and I don't get why Xander Cliff just gonna rag on him right now. I don't get why he said that the album sounds like just metal and pop, because it's really not. Like tracks like Sick of the Sun, that one's just a really dreamy pop track. And of course, you get the more metal moments, but it's really fun here. And Xander's, a lot of his criticisms I really could only pin down for Concrete, where that song was talking about candy, and maybe like one other track on the album. Anyways, there was incredible riffing, a really nice blend of a lot of metal elements and pop, of course, but also it even reaches like noise grind at some point. It reaches some crazy levels of weird production. And some really nice elements. And honestly, Don't Go Outside as a closing track, I think that happened before everyone had to actually stay inside. So, just kind of foreboding. All right, here we are. Number 10. Here we got Imperial Triumphant, Alphaville. Now, this starts a theme in our little top 10 here of atmosphere. Some of my favorite albums this year were just absolutely flooded with immense atmosphere. This album is no different. Avant-garde metal, post-metal, black and death metal. Just chuck these terms at it. But another thing you can't really disagree with, jazz. A lot of jazz elements. Some people, I think the Wikipedia entry for this album, it says jazz. And it's totally true. You've got these incredibly just wonky guitar riffs that are just slightly apart from awkward. And you got these samples from like dining room settings, and this whole thing kind of comes together like the atmosphere is like you're dining in like a fancy restaurant in Manhattan in like the 30s. Like this is real noir, but underneath the building maybe they're sacrificing people that you're eating, or they're trying to summon some eldritch deity. It's super crazy. These vocals sound ridiculously good. Like they are death metal vocals, but they just seem a little bit synthetic. Not quite synthetic, I want to say, but unnatural. This album was awesome. Absolutely give it a go if you like some good creepy atmosphere. And now for something completely opposite, Ichiko Ayoba Windswept Adan. I first saw this album recommended on Mew, and then I saw Fantano review it, and then Mew just kind of ditched it and said it sucked. Uh, Godspeed, Mew. I love you guys. Not that much to say about this album, other than the fact that it's gorgeous. It's really pretty. Everything here is like super pretty. Really creative uses of vocals and like chime sound effects and just all these different samples and instruments that makes a really nice, flowy, atmospheric, just whole piece here. One thing I actually had a really nice experience with this. I was on a plane flight back to this location and looking out the window. I was looking at the clouds with this playing over, and I couldn't imagine a better pairing. It's an absolutely peaceful release. If you need to calm down after Imperial Triumphant, there's not a better album than this one. Up next, we have Billy Cobb, Zelwy Part 2. Now, Billy Cobb is a proclaimed massive fan of Weezer, as am I. I'm a pretty big fan of Weezer. They were like the first band I got into. And as a result, this album gripped me really hard. So, as the title Zelwy implies, it is Weezer. Well, it's not quite Weezer, but it's supposed to basically be copying a style of Weezer. With the cover, you'd probably assume it's Pinkerton, and the emotions are meant to be Pinkerton, but it's kind of a blend between Pinkerton, some deluxe tracks of Pinkerton, and a lot of Blue as well, because these tracks are a lot longer than Pinkerton tracks. I don't. There's like one that's shorter, but it's not as direct and to the point, which actually kind of drags it behind Pinkerton, in my opinion. But I really hope that doesn't take away from you guys wanting to listen to it, because it's actually really effective. Billy Cobb's voice is awesome here. It's never too just sort of quirky and emo. It kind of hits the mark all the time. Some really good rumbly instrumentation. The bass tone on a lot of these tracks is super fat. It's sick. Some really nice guitar riffs, and the lyrics. Oh man, the lyrics and the singing. Just the first track about just the words "long and lonely winter." Are you gonna be the one that'll break my heart? I'm paraphrasing just a little bit here, but just starting the album off with that, it's just hurts. And the super ridiculous track Blockbuster, which is about the Blockbuster video store, is an incredibly nostalgic track, and it's just sort of like, you think it's gonna be super like quirky and weird in the joke, as tracks like the Bargain Mart imply with their title. But what's really nice is it starts talking about Blockbuster, and it's like, wow, that really ended 6+ years ago, and then just realize that that's passed you by. Like, you experienced Blockbuster, maybe only a little bit, but you definitely did, and now it's gone. But you remember around that time you were a lot happier. And who cares if Netflix is a streaming service? It's nicer. Or you got Mandalorian on Disney Plus. But I'm sure we all crave just some Blockbuster feelings. And where would I be talking about this album with admittedly the copy of Longtime Sunshine, Pepper's Ghost, where it's got like the song, and then it mashes every previous song hook just all together into a eruption of emotions. And I want to say it's an understatement. This is actually a tearjerker, and I'm not gonna lie to you guys. I don't cry a lot. I just don't. Not to be like, oh, I'm a man or anything like that. I cry on occasion, but not often. But this one was just about to get to me, because it just felt like, maybe I was happier back then. Maybe I did mess that up. Maybe this could have gone better. Minor flaws. I mean, there's that third track that's pretty much just repeating the whole thing over and over, but it's kind of like a canon in a way. It's kind of a cool composition. I felt that last track as a closer honestly could have been cut, and the whole album would have remained pretty much the same quality, but it's still a really solid song, and the ending marches on, just repeated over, kind of uplifting. It's a really nice feeling that you get from the track, so it does work. Overall, super solid album. I loved it. And now, I mentioned atmosphere. You don't get much more of that than Neptunian Maximalism's Eons. I could not begin to describe my grievance when Fantano put that on his Why You Know review, and he was just like, I don't care. And that'll lead to me with a lot more grabs with him this year. I think he's been focusing way too much on pop music and just not as much interesting releases. There are a couple things here and there that he mentioned that were like good, but it's always just like indie, pop, maybe like a hip hop album, mainly pop and indie, and it's just been grating on my soul that this album got passed up by him. I don't know how he did it. He got filtered because this thing is a beast. Look at that album cover. That is terrifying. And honestly, one of the best ways to enjoy this album is just stare at that while you crank out the 2+ hours of material here. And it's not really a drone album either. There is one track that's drone, but believe me, this thing is jazz. It is jazz. And when you could think that maybe like jazz is typically like, oh, you got like a nice groove underneath, and then you got someone soloing above, and then it sort of it whirls around in these solos, and it's a nice feeling overall. You're like, how much of a different sort of composition and feel can you shove into jazz music? Look no further than that opening track. You've got this baritone sax with just the meatiest, just biggest bite of a sound you've ever heard, and it's just rushing forward, and it sounds like a god is waking up. This is Azathoth, the trumpeters of Azoth, trying to keep him from waking up, but it's just not working, and now he's blowing his own trumpets. I should mention the concept behind this album. The concept behind this album is sort of a post-Anthropocene era where Earth is now ruled by hyper-intelligent elephants who took the place of the humans. And you hear it. It's shocking. You won't understand lyrics. They're in like several other languages, but you don't need to, because you've got these horn sections that sound otherworldly. You got these guitar sections where it really shows how you can use restraint and then just accelerate it, just slowly, just pile on more and more and more. This album makes you want to dance in a weird way. Not like you want to like groove, but you want to be shaking. Cue like Maynard James Keenan, just in like the Lateralis era, where he just like did some high note or a scream, and he's just bobbing all around. This album makes you want to do that. Absolutely terrifying release. A landmark debut from Neptune Maximus. Godspeed, Neptune Maximus. You guys killed it. Only real flaw about Eons was the drone sections. I just couldn't really get with as much. And now something that went completely under the radar for pretty much everyone I saw: Sex Swing Type 2. If you guys like no wave, if you guys like noise rock, if you guys like punk, if you guys like post-punk, you're gonna like this release. Don't expect a pleasant listening experience. Expect one of the most oppressive things you've ever heard. Imagine, instead of something that's like cataclysmic and impersonal, this album is very personal. It's very in your head, and it's very repetitive, especially in the lyrics. It's haunting in a way. It's like it's not gonna leave your head for a while. And I can honestly compare this a lot to Swans, a lot of their early release. Like if you like Filth or Cop, you are gonna love this thing. At the number 5 spot, we have Prague, baby, Intronaut, Fluid Existential Inversions. And I'm not even gonna lie to you guys, Neo Prague sucks. It's stupid. It's dumb. It's stupid. And I don't like it. It's just the worst elements of Prague, and they're like, how can we make it as pretentious and all this weird vocal wankery as possible, and how can we just neuter the genre, make it not fun for everybody? And then some people were like, oh, let's make it like half metal, and they're like, great, now it sucks in 2 different genres. Until of course a couple little popular neo-prog bands like Opeth and Porcupine Tree. But then Intronaut came along and said, hey guys, I have this great idea. What if we took neo-prog and made it good? Ladies and gentlemen, this thing is awesome. Some amazing riffs here, amazing solos as well, and the atmosphere behind it is very different from a lot of neo-prog. Normally neo-prog is like, how can I get the most pretentious, weird wankery ever, like just some really low, just muddy feelings just all the way through. But this thing grooves, and a lot of it is based around psychedelic drugs. You hear a lot of lyrics or samples even about just psychedelic stuff, and it's really nice, and it gives the album a bit more body and a bit more feeling behind it. It's almost like, instead of like, oh, I read sheet music and this polyrhythm says this, it's like hey, I like this African polyrhythm. Let's do it. And also the vocals behind this thing. At first, I couldn't get into them. They're actually really nice. It alternates between more like black metal shouts and almost more like thrashy shouts, and then like clean vocals. It kind of rotates all back and forth. It's really nice touch. Solid, solid, solid prog album. Prog album of the year, technically of the decade, but we'll see. Ladies and gentlemen, we got a black metal pick. Enslaved are back. I listened to this album not very long after listening to ISA with the black metal chart. You guys know. But I honestly didn't expect that much from this thing, and what I got was one of the coolest, most refreshing black metal releases of the year. And yeah, they're kind of boomers now. They're old, you know, and you think they're just like losing their luster. They're not. This thing is sick. Still got a little bit of proggy elements. It's still got clean vocals. There's one track on here that's like almost synth pop, but it's not quite. But yeah, like almost like a little bit of post-punk influence on this thing, but it manages to maintain this immense atmosphere. And one thing I gotta appreciate about this thing is the atmosphere has a narrative behind it. Of course, I love Burzum with their world building. Of course, I love Burzum with his world building and Hivis set to Us. Of course, I love Immortals world building of Blashirk. I love Paysage d'Hiver with the world of Paysage d'Hiver. And now Enslaved has Utgard. And they might have mentioned it previously, but here it is so good. Granted, I don't know if they mentioned it here previously. Whether or not, it's great now. You are opened up to this album with this chorus of Viking chanting in this sort of like choral way before it turns into like normal black metal. And it's a really nice take on some good old-fashioned Viking black metal. This thing is dark. It is icy cold, and I mean that, but it is furious at the same time. This thing just gets you moving. It's a little bit proggy, but ultimately highly refreshing. Great black metal album. Enslaved is back, and I hope they keep making more like this. And number 3, we have an album that honestly I thought could have been number 2, maybe even number 1. We have the new Rameses Pazuzu, Mastarin Insi. I'll link this one in the description. Don't even try to look it up. I don't ask me how to spell it. I don't know if you guys have ever read like dialogue from like a Cthulhu reading where it's got Cthulhu Relaya, or that is a butchering of the pronunciation, but you have these words that you just don't get. They don't seem like in any language you could think of. This album is that language to life. And believe me, I love some good atmospheric black metal. I love some good avant-garde black metal. I love some good post-black metal. And sorry, Xander, post-metal even. But this thing takes it to a whole other level. You got songs that are a little more guitar-led, songs that are a little more synth-led, a lot of synth-led tracks. But these things build like crazy. And it's not as much like a crash through of sounds, maybe, and you just think of it as like sounds or just emotion. It's horrifying. It is a buildup of tension, and it breaks through, and you're like, oh, fine, time to diffuse it. No, it's so much worse. It's just punching you in the face. Just atmosphere, and just crazy, crazy things. I gotta give a special shout out to the last track on this album. That thing is an assault upon the eardrums. It is brutal. Blast beats and tremolo guitar the whole time. Probably the most conventional black metal track the whole time. But that thing will drive you into the floor. I got an amazing experience out of it by, honestly, I was listening to that and just staring at pictures of Shub-Niggurath from H.P. Lovecraft. Because honestly, I pictured this album as maybe like the birth of Shub-Niggurath, or Azathoth, or Yog-Sothoth, or one of them. Absolutely crushing album. A lot of our critics got filtered by this one, but I totally love it. Absolutely check it out if you got the time. Ladies and gentlemen, at number 2, we got the guy that did the Good Time soundtrack. That movie is so based. Watch it. This is One O Tricks Point Never. Magic One O Tricks Point Never. I'll admit, I'm not that much into plunder phonics. It's just a genre that's eluded me. Just never quite caught my eye. But when I saw that the guy who did the Good Time soundtrack, and also that replica, obviously, was making a new album this year, and I saw it was getting good ratings, I decided to check it out. And I'm telling you, the critics are not wrong. This thing's awesome. One of the best things I can do to describe this thing is that it's just constant washes of gorgeous sound. It's glitchy at points. At other points, it feels a lot more conventional, which is so crazy knowing that these are all stitched together samples, just sort of mashed into this way that sounds like just a totally normal song almost, but a very, very good one at that. It's very hard to describe this album, so I apologize if I seem a little surface level in my description, but I just gotta admit, I really dig the sounds behind here. It builds a lot of tension and a lot of nice noises here. The textures are gorgeous. First, I didn't like the noise section that's sort of towards the last leg of the album, but I've grown to appreciate it a lot more. And I don't really know how all the sort of string sort of portions go, because there are like a million different string samples, but every one of them is gorgeous. Ladies and gentlemen, for number one, what is the number one album 2020? The debut of the new decade. It's Halsey. Manic. Just kidding. Vegetable Cutters. Fiona Apple. Did you think I was serious? No, it's not Fiona Apple. Get out of here. Here, we're not plebs here. Listen to good music. Oh, ladies and gentlemen, number one is Uman by Enslaved. This thing, it's so hard to talk about this without getting hyped. So freaking good. You guys like King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard? Then you will love Enslaved. Do you guys like Psych era Pink Floyd? Then you will love Enslaved. You guys like krautrock, Can? Then you will love Enslaved. Do you guys love good music? Then you will love Enslaved. Do you guys love getting up in the morning and having something to do that's not gonna make you wanna just jump out your window and quit your job? Then you're gonna love Enslaved. Uman is an incredible album. Combination of psych, krautrock, a little bit of progressive rock, stoner, doom metal. Oh my gosh, this thing gets me so excited just thinking about it. It is incredible. And honestly, I'm just gonna give a little disclaimer so you guys don't go into it and be a little pleb and get filtered. Just maybe every once in a while, the vocals might not be your favorite because they're just a little bit, maybe a little cheesy on a track to it. Namely, It's Coming, where they say it's coming, and they're kind of chanting it over and over just a little bit. But you can get past that. If you can enjoy that, you can just take the red pill, not be a little baby, and enjoy it. And you're gonna love everything on this album because it's incredible. France, I don't know anything about France. They made Enslaved though, so they can't be that bad. First of all, look at that album cover. That thing's awesome. That's what this album sounds like. It sounds like that man. He's dragging his sword through space, this space rock scene, and he's hearing these incredibly dense sounds. He's hearing this guy yelling, and this these gang shouts, but then he's like singing, and you got these crazy riffs, and you got these songs sort of looping together towards the end of the album. So good. I would be doing you guys a disservice if I didn't recommend this to you guys. It is on my topsters, and there's only so many things that can go on a topsters. Please, if you want a heavier King Gizzard or just a new thing to listen to that's gonna blow your socks off, listen to Uman by Enslaved. Went completely unrecognized by critics, but I'm actually like begging you guys, listen to it. Okay, guys, so that is the definitive top 10 albums of 2020. Obviously, there's no better list. Don't even check anyone else out. Except those critics I mentioned. Go ahead and check out Wadix Him. Check out Xander J. Cliff. He made a huge live stream documenting a lot of these albums. That dude's super smart, and he's got a lot of picks that I've never even heard on there. The dude's a genius. Just check his list out. And Fantano, you can watch him if you don't know him already. I swear, if I get comments saying he lives rent free in my head, you'd be correct. But anyway, a lot of great albums here. Hope you guys check them out. Hope just please find it in your heart to maybe listen to one or two that sounds appealing to you. Of course, I'll understand not everyone likes every bit of music out there. If this doesn't sound appealing to you, just give it a skip. But I hope you find it in your heart to give it at least a try. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed. I certainly did. I'm looking forward to a great 2021, at least in terms of music. I will be checking out a lot more new music this year because I'm getting a little bit of the swing of this 2020 sort of YouTube scene that I'm creating. And I'm so excited to see you guys on this journey with me. For January, we have genre January. I'll make a tweet about the video that's coming up this week. Anyways, hope you guys enjoyed. I'd appreciate a like and maybe even a subscribe if you're feeling it. If you have any comments, questions, or concerns, because I'm sure you guys do, on my top 10, go ahead and comment down below. Or find my social media in the description below. And that's about it. Hope you guys are doing well out there. We'll see you guys next time. Have a good day.